When my sister called me irresponsible for booking another flight to Portugal, I thought it was just typical family concern. When she started questioning my priorities in front of our parents, I figured she was worried about my future. But when I discovered what she'd been doing behind my back to sabotage my travel business, I realized this wasn't about money at all. This was about something much darker. Something that would tear our family apart and force me to choose between the life I'd built and the people I thought I could trust. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The notification chimed on my phone as I sat in the window seat, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. Another booking confirmation for my travel consulting business. Mrs. Henderson from Phoenix had just signed up for my premium Italy package, the one that included the private vineyard tours and cooking classes. In Tuscany, I smiled, watching the clouds drift past the airplane window, calculating the commission in my head. This single booking would cover my rent for 2 months. My phone buzzed again. A text from my sister Madison. "Really, Jana? Another trip to Europe? When are you going to grow up and settle down like a normal person?" I stared at the message, feeling that familiar knot form in my stomach. Here I was, returning from a successful business trip to Lisbon where I'd secured partnerships with 3 boutique hotels, and she was treating me like some reckless college student blowing her trust fund on spring break. I'd spent the last 4 years building my travel consulting business from nothing. What started as helping friends plan their honeymoons had grown into a 6-figure operation. I specialized in creating authentic, off-the-beaten-path experiences for clients who wanted more than generic tourist packages. My Instagram account had over 40,000 followers who hung on every recommendation, every hidden gem I discovered in my travels. But to Madison, I was just her little sister playing dress-up in an adult world. The thing is, I understood her perspective, at least, partially. Growing up, Madison had been the responsible one. While I was dreaming about backpacking through Southeast Asia, she was studying for her accounting degree. When I dropped out of college to start my business, she was landing her first job at a prestigious firm in downtown Seattle. Madison had always followed the traditional path: steady job, company car, 401k, mortgage on a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs with her husband Kyle and their 2 young kids. But what she couldn't see, or refused to acknowledge, was that my way of living wasn't irresponsible. It was calculated. Every trip served multiple purposes. I was constantly researching new destinations, building relationships with local vendors, creating content for my social media channels, and developing fresh itineraries for clients. Last month's trip to Morocco resulted in partnerships with 4 riads in Marrakesh and a contract with a luxury tour operator that would bring in steady income for the next year. I landed at SeaTac Airport on a Tuesday evening, exhausted but satisfied. The Portugal trip had been incredibly productive. I'd negotiated exclusive rates with a charming pousada in Óbidos, discovered an incredible family-run restaurant in Porto that would be perfect for my food-focused tours, and shot enough content to keep my social media feeds busy for weeks. My phone was already buzzing with inquiries from potential clients who'd seen my Instagram stories. Madison was waiting for me at baggage claim, which surprised me. She rarely made the effort to pick me up from the airport, usually citing her busy schedule with work and the kids. She stood near the carousel in her typical outfit, pressed slacks, conservative blouse, everything perfectly coordinated and practical. Her hair was pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn since college, not a strand out of place. When she saw me approaching with my well-traveled suitcase covered in destination stickers, her expression tightened. "Good trip?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral as she helped me load my luggage into her Honda Pilot. "Amazing," I replied, settling into the passenger seat. I found this incredible pottery workshop in Óbidos where clients can create their own pieces to take home. The owner, Maria, has been working with clay for 60 years. She taught me techniques that her grandmother passed down to her. The stories she shared about Portuguese traditions were incredible. Madison's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly as she started the engine. "That's nice, Jana. How much did this learning experience cost you?" The question stung because of how she asked it, with that particular tone she'd perfected over the years, the one that made me feel like a child explaining away a broken vase. "It's a business expense, Madison. Everything I do is research for my clients. This trip alone is going to generate at least 20,000 in new bookings. If you say so." She pulled out of the parking garage, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Mom called me yesterday. She's worried about you." "Worried about what?" "About your lifestyle. The constant traveling, the lack of stability. She thinks you're running away from real responsibility." Madison merged onto the highway, her eyes fixed straight ahead. "She asked me to talk to you about maybe considering a more traditional career path." I stared out the window at the Seattle skyline, feeling a familiar frustration building in my chest. This conversation had been brewing for months. Ever since my business had started gaining real traction, Madison had become increasingly critical of my choices. What had once been gentle teasing about my wanderlust had evolved into pointed comments about my financial decisions and life priorities. "Madison, my business made more money last year than your accounting salary," I said quietly. "I own my apartment, outright. I have more in savings than most people my age. I'm not running away from responsibility. I'm building a life that makes me happy. But what happens when you get older, when you want to have a family? You can't just jet off to Portugal when you have children to think about." Her voice was rising slightly, a crack appearing in her usual controlled demeanor. "Kyle and I have built something stable, something lasting. We have college funds for Emma and Noah. We have health insurance, life insurance, a retirement plan. What do you have besides passport stamps and Instagram followers?" The conversation continued for the entire 30-minute drive to my apartment, each exchange growing more heated. Madison questioned everything from my business model to my dating life, painting my carefully constructed career as nothing more than an elaborate form of escapism. She brought up our childhood, how I'd always been the dreamer while she'd been the planner, how our parents had worried about me even then, wondering if I'd ever find direction. What hurt most was hearing her describe my passion as a phase, something I'd eventually outgrow when real life demanded more from me. She talked about my travels, like they were expensive hobbies rather than the foundation of a legitimate business. Every client I'd helped, every positive review I'd received, every feature in travel magazines, she dismissed it all as temporary success that couldn't possibly last. By the time she dropped me off, the tension between us was palpable. As I stood on the sidewalk watching her drive away, I felt something shift in our relationship. For the first time, I realized that Madison didn't just disapprove of my choices. She resented them. The life I'd built, the freedom I'd created for myself, the success I'd achieved on my own terms, it all seemed to genuinely bother her in a way I'd never fully understood. My apartment felt different when I walked in that night. The same beautiful space I'd designed with carefully chosen pieces from my travels suddenly felt like evidence in a case against me. The Moroccan textiles, the Italian ceramics, the photographs from dozens of countries, Madison would see all of it as proof of my frivolous spending and lack of focus. But to me, each item told a story of growth, discovery, and the business relationships that sustained my career. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, looking through the photos from Portugal on my camera. In one image, I was laughing with Maria at her pottery wheel, clay covering both our hands as she showed me a technique her family had used for generations. In another, I was sharing a meal with the owner of a small hotel in Sintra, discussing how we could create packages that would bring her American guests while giving my clients authentic Portuguese experiences. These weren't vacation photos. They were documentation of work, of relationship building, of the slow and careful process of creating something meaningful. But I realized that to Madison, they probably looked like the Instagram feed of someone who had never learned the difference between work and play. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mother asking if we could all have dinner that weekend. Madison had apparently called her after dropping me off, expressing concerns about my increasingly reckless behavior. The message was polite, but I could read between the lines. This wasn't going to be a casual family dinner. This was going to be an intervention. As I sat in my apartment, looking at my laptop screen filled with new client inquiries and partnership opportunities, I felt the weight of what was coming. Madison had always been the voice of reason in our family, the one our parents turned to for level-headed advice. If she was telling them I was being irresponsible, they would listen. And somehow, I would have to defend the life I'd worked so hard to build against the people who were supposed to support me most. The family dinner happened on Saturday night at our parents' house in Bellevue, the same dining room where we'd shared countless meals growing up. Mom had made her famous lasagna. Dad opened a bottle of wine from the collection he'd been building since before Madison and I were born. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension the moment I walked through the front door. Madison arrived first with Kyle and the kids. Emma, now 8, immediately ran to show me drawings she'd made at school while 6-year-old Noah demonstrated his latest soccer moves in the living room. Kyle greeted me with his usual warm hug, asking genuine questions about my recent trip. He'd always been supportive of my business, often joking that he lived vicariously through my travel photos since his corporate job at Microsoft kept him tied to Seattle most of the year. "Jana, Noah's been asking when Aunt Jana is going to take him on an adventure," Kyle said with a grin, ruffling his son's hair. "I told him maybe when he's older you can show him some of those incredible places you find." Madison's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "We'll see about that," she said, steering the conversation toward safer topics like Emma's upcoming school play and Noah's soccer season. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Dad asked about my Portugal trip, genuinely curious about the business aspects. He'd been an entrepreneur himself, running a small construction company for 30 years before retiring. Unlike Madison, he understood the challenges of building something from scratch, the constant hustle required to maintain clients and find new opportunities. "The hotel partnerships sound promising," he said, cutting into his lasagna. "Having exclusive relationships with properties gives you a real competitive advantage. How many destinations do you work with now?" 15 countries across Europe. "With expanding partnerships in Morocco and Turkey," I replied, grateful for his interest. "I'm working on adding some locations in Southeast Asia, too. There's incredible demand for authentic cultural experiences in Vietnam and Cambodia. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel." Now, back to where we left off. Mom nodded along, but I could see the worry lines forming around her eyes. "That's wonderful, honey, but all that traveling must be exhausting. When do you get to just be home and relax?" "I love what I do, Mom. When you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work." I reached for my wine glass, trying to keep my tone light. "Besides, I work from home between trips. I have plenty of downtime." Madison set down her fork with slightly more force than necessary. "Downtime spent planning the next trip, though. You haven't stayed in Seattle longer than 3 weeks in the past 6 months." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his seat while the kids continued eating, oblivious to the adult tension building around them. Dad cleared his throat, trying to navigate the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Madison has a point about balance," Mom said carefully. "We just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, not burning out from all the constant motion." I felt the familiar defensive walls going up, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm actually healthier and happier than I've ever been. My business is thriving, I'm financially secure, and I wake up every day excited about what I'm doing." But what about settling down? Madison interjected, her voice taking on that particular edge I'd come to recognize. What about finding someone to share your life with? How can you build a real relationship when you're never in one place long enough to get to know someone? Kyle reached over and squeezed her hand, a gentle warning to ease up, but Madison seemed determined to push forward. The conversation that followed felt like an interrogation disguised as family concern. Every aspect of my life was scrutinized and found wanting. My dating history was dissected, my financial planning questioned, my future goals dismissed as unrealistic pipe dreams. What struck me most was how Madison seemed to have prepared for this conversation. She had statistics about the failure rate of travel-related businesses, quotes from articles about the psychological dangers of constant movement, and carefully constructed arguments about why my lifestyle was ultimately unsustainable. I read an article in Forbes last week, she said, pulling out her phone to reference it. It talked about how the travel industry is one of the most volatile sectors for small businesses. The pandemic proved that. One global crisis and entire companies disappeared overnight. The pandemic affected every industry, I countered. And, actually, it forced me to diversify my services. I started offering virtual travel experiences, consultation services for people planning future trips, and online cultural workshops. My business adapted and survived while a lot of traditional companies struggled. Dad looked impressed despite himself. That shows real resilience, Jana. The ability to pivot during crisis is what separates successful entrepreneurs from those who don't make it. But Madison wasn't deterred. She had an answer for everything, a counter-argument for every point I made. It became clear that this wasn't really a conversation about my choices. It was a campaign designed to convince our parents that intervention was necessary. After dinner, while Mom was serving dessert and the kids were playing in the living room, Madison cornered me in the kitchen. Her voice was low, urgent, as if she was trying to save me from myself. Jana, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm worried about you. This constant running from place to place, it's not healthy. It's like you're afraid to stop moving because if you did, you might have to face some uncomfortable truths about what you really want from life. I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the accusation. What uncomfortable truths? I know exactly what I want. I want to build my business, help people have incredible experiences, and live life on my own terms. But don't you want a family someday? Children of your own? A partner who shares your life instead of just following your adventures on social media? Her eyes were intense, searching my face for cracks in my confidence. You can't tell me you don't get lonely sometimes, in all those hotel rooms in foreign countries. The question hit deeper than I expected, because there was some truth to it. I did get lonely sometimes. There were nights in beautiful places where I wished I had someone special to share the sunset with. Someone who understood my passion and wanted to be part of the journey. But that didn't mean my entire life was wrong. Of course I get lonely sometimes. Everyone does. But loneliness isn't solved by settling for the wrong life just to have company. I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to find words that would help her understand. Madison, I'm not running away from anything. I'm running toward everything I've ever dreamed of. She shook her head, frustration clear in her expression. You're 32 years old, Jana. At some point, dreams have to become reality, and reality means making compromises, putting down roots, building something lasting. I am building something lasting. My business, my reputation, my expertise. Just because it doesn't look like your version of success doesn't mean it's not real. The conversation was interrupted by Emma running into the kitchen, asking for another piece of cake. Madison immediately shifted into mom mode, helping her niece with dessert and steering her back toward the living room. But the tension remained, simmering just beneath the surface of family politeness. The rest of the evening passed in careful small talk. We discussed safe topics like the kids' activities, Dad's latest home improvement project, and Mom's book club. But I could feel Madison watching me, cataloging every response, every gesture, as if collecting evidence for her case against my lifestyle. When it was time to leave, the goodbyes were strained. Mom hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "Just think about what Madison said, okay? We love you and want you to be happy, but we also want you to be safe and settled." Dad's hug was warmer, more supportive. "Keep doing what you're doing, kiddo," he murmured, "but maybe throw your old man a bone and stay home for a couple months this summer. I miss having both my daughters around." The drive back to my apartment was quiet, but my mind was racing. I kept replaying the evening, analyzing every comment, every look, every subtle implication. Madison's concerns weren't entirely without merit. I did travel frequently, my lifestyle was unconventional, and my future was less predictable than hers. But her solutions felt like prison sentences disguised as practical advice. Over the next few days, I found myself second-guessing decisions I'd been confident about for years. When a client called asking about a custom trip to Iceland, I caught myself wondering if I should really commit to another international research trip so soon after Portugal. When my friend Sarah invited me to her engagement party, I declined, partly because of work commitments, but also because I wasn't sure I could handle another evening of well-meaning questions about my own relationship status. Madison texted me throughout the week, sharing articles about financial planning, links to local job postings at travel agencies, and invitations to double dates with her and Kyle's married friends. Each message felt like a gentle nudge toward the life she thought I should want, accompanied by subtle reminders of what I was supposedly missing. "There's a position open at the travel department of Kyle's company," she wrote on Wednesday. "Corporate travel coordination, good benefits, stable schedule. I could put in a word if you're interested." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thanks, but I'm happy with my business." Her reply came immediately. "Just keeping options open. Sometimes the best opportunities come when we're not actively looking." The strangest part was that some of her suggestions weren't entirely unreasonable. The corporate travel position probably paid well and came with excellent benefits. The men she wanted to set me up with were successful, attractive, and looking for serious relationships. The apartments she sent me listings for were in safe neighborhoods with good schools nearby, perfect for raising a family. But every suggestion felt like a step away from the person I'd worked so hard to become, the woman who could navigate the souks of Marrakech with confidence, who spoke enough Portuguese to negotiate hotel contracts, who had built a business from nothing but passion and determination. That woman wouldn't exist in the life Madison was trying to design for me. Thursday evening, I was editing photos from my Portugal trip when Madison called. Her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than it had been during our recent conversations. "Jana, I owe you an apology. I've been pushing too hard and I know it. I don't want you to think I don't respect what you've accomplished. Your business is incredible, truly. I worry about you." The unexpected gentleness in her voice caught me off guard. "I know you worry, Madison. I appreciate that you care. Can we start over? Maybe I can try to understand your world better instead of trying to change it." She paused, and I could hear Noah chattering in the background. "Would you be willing to show me exactly how your business works? The real nuts and bolts of it? Maybe if I understood better, I could worry less." It was the first olive branch she'd extended in weeks, and despite everything, I wanted to accept it. Madison was my sister, and underneath all the criticism and concern, I knew she loved me. Maybe if she could see my work through my eyes, she'd understand that my choices weren't reckless or selfish. They were deliberate and purposeful. "I'd love that," I replied. "I have a big client project coming up, planning an anniversary trip for a couple who want to recreate their honeymoon but with luxury upgrades. I could walk you through the entire process." That sounds perfect. And Jana, I really am proud of you. I know I haven't shown it well lately, but what you've built is impressive. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself while you're taking care of everyone else. We made plans to meet that weekend at my apartment, where I could show her my office setup, my client management systems, and the detailed research process that went into every trip I planned. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful that we could find a way forward that honored both her concerns and my dreams. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that this newfound understanding might be more complicated than either of us expected. Madison's concerns ran deeper than simple worry about my lifestyle, and my defensive reaction suggested that her criticism had hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. We were both trying to bridge a gap that had been widening for years, and I wasn't sure either of us fully understood how wide it had become. The weekend meeting would reveal more than either of us anticipated, setting the stage for conflicts and revelations that would test not just our relationship, but everything I thought I knew about my place in our family. Saturday afternoon arrived with unexpected sunshine, rare for Seattle in early March. Madison knocked on my apartment door precisely at 2 o'clock, carrying a notebook and wearing casual clothes instead of her usual business attire. She looked around my space with fresh eyes, taking in details she'd previously dismissed as frivolous decoration. "I never really noticed how organized your office setup is," she admitted, following me to the converted bedroom that served as my headquarters. 3 monitors displayed different aspects of my business: client communications, booking platforms, and a detailed spreadsheet tracking partnerships across 14 countries. A large corkboard covered one wall, filled with photos, business cards, and contact information from hotel owners, tour guides, and restaurant managers I'd met during my travels. "This is impressive, Jana. It's like a command center." She pulled out her phone and took a picture of my organizational system. "Kyle's going to love seeing this. He's always talking about workflow optimization at Microsoft." I walked her through my current project, planning a 25th anniversary celebration for Robert and Linda Carlson from Portland. They'd honeymooned in Italy 25 years ago on a shoestring budget, staying in hostels and eating at tourist restaurants. Now, with their kids grown and their business successful, they wanted to return and experience Italy the way they'd dreamed about as newlyweds. "So you're not just booking flights and hotels," Madison said, studying my detailed itinerary. "You're essentially recreating their love story but elevating every element." "Exactly. Look at this." I clicked through photos of a private villa in Tuscany. They stayed in a youth hostel in Florence on their original trip. Now they'll have this entire villa to themselves, complete with a private chef who'll teach them to make pasta the way Linda's grandmother used to. The chef actually trained at the same culinary school Linda always dreamed of attending. Madison leaned closer to the screen, genuinely intrigued. "How did you find someone so specifically perfect for their story?" "Months of research and relationship building. I don't just Google cooking classes in Tuscany. I go there, meet people, hear their stories, understand what makes each experience unique." I showed her a folder filled with detailed notes from my last trip to Italy. This chef, Antonio, lost his wife 5 years ago. He started teaching cooking classes as a way to honor her memory and share the recipes she'd collected from her travels. When he heard about Robert and Linda's anniversary story, he immediately wanted to be part of their celebration. For the next 2 hours, Madison asked intelligent questions about every aspect of the business. She wanted to understand my pricing structure, my marketing strategy, my client acquisition process. I showed her testimonials from satisfied customers, revenue projections for the next quarter, and partnership agreements that guaranteed income streams for the coming year. "Your profit margins are actually better than I expected," she admitted, reviewing my financial spreadsheets. "I was imagining you barely breaking even after covering all the travel expenses." "The travel is an investment that pays dividends for years. That pottery workshop I did in Portugal? I've already booked 3 clients for private sessions with Maria. Each booking generates $1,500 in commission, and I spent maybe $200 on the original workshop." I pulled up my booking calendar, showing her the steady stream of confirmed trips extending through the fall. The key is building authentic relationships that create unique experiences. Anyone can book a hotel room. Not everyone can arrange. For clients to have dinner in a local family's home or learn traditional crafts from master artisans. Madison's phone buzzed with a text from Kyle, asking how the business education session was going. She showed me his message, laughing. He told me if I came back with a better understanding of your work, he'd take me on a long weekend somewhere. Romantic. Apparently, he's been dropping hints about wanting to hire you to plan something special. I'd love to help you guys plan a trip. Where has he been wanting to go? Ireland. His grandmother emigrated from County Cork, and he's always talked about tracing his family roots there. But with the kids and work, it seemed too complicated to organize. She looked thoughtful. Maybe it doesn't have to be as impossible as I thought. We spent another hour brainstorming potential Ireland itineraries, discussing how to make the trip educational for Emma and Noah while still romantic for Madison and Kyle. I showed her family-friendly castles, genealogy research services, and cultural experiences that would appeal to different age groups. For the first time in months, we were collaborating instead of competing. You know what? I owe you a huge apology, Madison said as we moved to the living room with cups of coffee. I've been so focused on the risks of your lifestyle that I completely missed how strategic and professional your approach actually is. This isn't some quarter-life crisis extended indefinitely. This is a legitimate business built on real expertise. Her acknowledgement meant more than I'd expected. Thank you for taking the time to understand it. I know my life looks chaotic from the outside. It's not chaotic. It's just different from what I'm used to. She curled up in my armchair, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. I think part of my concern came from jealousy, if I'm being honest. Your life looks so free, so full of adventure and possibility. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been braver, if I'd chosen passion over security. The confession surprised me. Madison had always seemed completely confident in her choices, perfectly content with her structured life. You could still travel, you know. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe. Kyle and I have talked about taking the kids to Europe once they're older. It would be amazing to have you plan something for us. Someone who actually understands what makes a trip special instead of just checking boxes off a tourist list. Over the following weeks, our relationship transformed in ways I hadn't thought possible. Madison started following my Instagram account, commenting thoughtfully on photos and sharing posts with her friends. She referred 2 of her co-workers to me for vacation planning, both of whom became repeat clients. More importantly, she began defending my career choices when other family members or friends made dismissive comments. Jana runs a sophisticated operation, I heard her tell our cousin Michelle at a family barbecue. She's not just traveling for fun, she's building partnerships and conducting market research that most big travel companies would envy. The validation from Madison seemed to unlock support from other quarters as well. Mom started sharing my social media posts with her book club friends, several of whom reached out about planning trips for milestone birthdays and anniversaries. Dad mentioned my business to his former construction clients, many of whom had reached retirement age and were looking for guidance on their dream vacations. My business hit a new milestone in April when Travel Plus Leisure magazine featured me in an article about innovative boutique travel consultants. The piece highlighted my approach to cultural immersion and authentic local experiences, using the Carlsons' Italy anniversary trip as a case study. The article generated dozens of new inquiries and led to partnership offers from luxury travel brands. I saw the magazine article, Madison texted me the day it published. I bought 5 copies and left them in the waiting room at work. I'm so proud of you. The success felt different this time because it was shared. Instead of celebrating alone, in my apartment, I had family members who understood what the recognition meant, who could appreciate the work that had gone into building my reputation. Madison even suggested we throw a small party to celebrate, inviting our parents and some close friends. But success has a way of attracting attention, not all of it welcome. Around the same time that my business was gaining recognition, I started noticing small problems that didn't quite make sense. A client called to complain about a hotel reservation that had been mysteriously canceled, forcing them to scramble for alternative accommodations during peak tourist season in Barcelona. Another client mentioned that they'd received conflicting information about their Florence cooking class, with the instructor claiming he'd never confirmed the private session I'd arranged months earlier. Initially, I attributed these issues to normal business hiccups. The travel industry is complex, with multiple moving parts and potential points of failure. Miscommunications happen, reservation systems glitch, and occasionally vendors make mistakes or double book their services. I handled each problem professionally, finding alternative solutions and ensuring my clients still had amazing experiences. But the pattern continued, and it always seemed to involve my most high-profile bookings. The clients who were planning milestone celebrations, who had generous budgets, who were most likely to leave glowing reviews and refer their friends. These were the bookings that generated the most commission and created the most visibility for my business. It's probably just growing pains, Madison suggested when I mentioned the unusual string of complications. You're handling more complex bookings with higher expectations. Sometimes success comes with new challenges. Her response made sense, and I wanted to believe that explanation. My business was growing rapidly, I was working with more demanding clients, and I was pushing into new markets where my relationships weren't as established. It seemed logical that some friction would accompany expansion. Meanwhile, my relationship with Madison continued to strengthen. She started joining me for coffee meetings with potential clients, offering perspective on logistics and practical considerations that complemented my creative vision. Her accounting background proved invaluable when reviewing contracts with new hotel partners or negotiating commission structures with tour operators. "You're like having a business partner without the legal complications," I joked after she helped me identify problematic clauses in a vendor agreement. "I enjoy it," she replied. "It's nice to use my financial skills for something more exciting than corporate tax returns and budget projections." Kyle was supportive of Madison's growing involvement in my business, especially since it had rekindled her enthusiasm for travel and adventure. They booked the Ireland trip I'd designed for them, planning to travel that summer while Emma and Noah stayed with our parents. Madison approached the trip with the same detailed preparation she brought to everything else, researching their itinerary and making lists of questions to ask at each genealogy site. "I haven't seen her this excited about anything in years," Kyle confided during a family dinner. "She's already talking about where you might send us next. Maybe Scotland to explore my mother's side of the family." The Ireland trip exceeded all their expectations. Madison sent me photos throughout the week, Kyle emotional as he stood in the churchyard where his great-great-grandparents had been married, Emma fascinated by ancient Celtic symbols carved into castle walls, Noah attempting to learn traditional Irish dancing from a local performer. But more than individual moments, she captured the joy of discovery, the bonding that happens when a family explores new places together. "You were right about everything," she texted on their last day. "This isn't just a vacation. It's become part of our family story. The kids are already asking about traditions they want to continue when they're older." Their success story became one of my most powerful marketing tools. Madison wrote a detailed review of their experience, highlighting not just the beautiful destinations, but the personal transformation that had occurred during the trip. Her testimonial emphasized how my planning had taken care of every detail, allowing them to focus completely on spending time together and creating memories. "Jana didn't just book our trip," she wrote. "She understood our family dynamics, our interests, and our budget, then created an experience that brought us closer together while showing us parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. This is what travel should be, but so rarely is." The review was shared widely on social media, generating more inquiries than any previous marketing effort. Several other families with heritage research interests reached out, wanting similar experiences in countries ranging from Germany to Greece to Norway. I found myself specializing in a niche I hadn't expected: heritage tourism that combined genealogy research with cultural immersion. By late spring, everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. My business was thriving, my family relationships had healed, and I was gaining recognition in the travel industry for innovative approaches to personalized experiences. Madison had become not just a supportive sister, but a valuable collaborator who brought skills and perspective that enhanced my work. But underneath this surface success, the small problems continued. A restaurant in Rome claimed they'd never received payment for a private dinner I'd arranged, despite my records showing the transaction had cleared weeks earlier. A tour guide in Prague accused me of booking overlapping groups for the same time slot, creating an embarrassing situation for clients who'd paid for exclusive access. A luxury hotel in Vienna insisted they had no record of special amenities I'd arranged for a couple celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Each incident was resolved, but not without stress, additional costs, and uncomfortable conversations with disappointed clients. I began double-checking everything, maintaining redundant records, and following up with vendors more frequently than should have been necessary. The extra administrative work was cutting into time I needed for research and relationship building. "Maybe you need to hire an assistant," Madison suggested during one of our coffee meetings. "Someone who can handle the detail management while you focus on the creative aspects and business development." It was a reasonable suggestion, and I'd been considering it for months. But something about the pattern of problems made me hesitant to bring another person into the business until I understood what was causing the complications. The issues weren't random. They seemed targeted, designed to create maximum embarrassment and require the most time-intensive solutions. Still, outwardly, everything looked perfect. My social media presence was stronger than ever. My client satisfaction ratings remained high despite the behind-the-scenes complications, and my revenue was tracking well ahead of projections. The Travel Plus Leisure article had led to speaking, opportunities at travel industry conferences, and I'd been invited to contribute to a guidebook about authentic cultural experiences in Europe. Madison was my biggest cheerleader through all of this success, sharing every achievement with our parents and friends. She seemed genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished, and her newfound understanding of my business made her an effective advocate when others questioned my unconventional career path. "Look at what she's built," I heard her tell our Aunt Linda during a family gathering. "She's created something completely original, and she's being recognized nationally for her expertise. How many people can say they've been featured in major magazines for doing work they're truly passionate about?" As summer approached and Madison and Kyle prepared for their Ireland trip, I felt more optimistic about the future than I had in years. The problems with vendor communications were irritating, but they seemed manageable. My business was growing, my family relationships were strong, and I was finally receiving the recognition I'd worked toward for so long. I had no idea that the very success I was celebrating had attracted the attention of someone who viewed my achievements not as inspiration, but as a threat that needed to be neutralized. The small problems I'd been experiencing weren't random complications or growing pains. They were the opening moves in a calculated campaign designed to destroy everything I'd built, orchestrated by someone who had access to my business operations and intimate knowledge of how to inflict maximum damage. The calm before the storm had never felt more deceptive. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in late June, printed on thick cardstock with embossed lettering. Pacific Northwest Travel Guild was hosting their annual summit in Vancouver, and they wanted me to coordinate a 3-day cultural immersion experience for 50 of the region's most influential travel writers, bloggers, and industry executives. The theme was Authentic Pacific Northwest, Beyond the Tourist Trail, and they specifically requested my expertise in creating unique, locally sourced experiences. "This is huge, Jana," Madison said when I called to share the news. "Vancouver's perfect for you. It's close enough that you can manage every detail personally, but international enough to showcase your cultural immersion expertise. I was already mentally designing the itinerary: private First Nations storytelling sessions, behind-the-scenes tours of local artisan workshops, exclusive tastings at family-owned wineries in the Fraser Valley. The Guild was offering a substantial, fee-plus coverage of all expenses, but more importantly, they were providing access to decision-makers who could transform my boutique business into a nationally recognized brand. The timing couldn't be better, I told Madison over coffee that afternoon. Travel Plus Leisure wants to do a follow-up feature about innovative group experiences. If I can create something spectacular for the Guild Summit, it could lead to corporate partnerships with major travel companies. Madison leaned forward, genuinely excited. What kind of experiences are you thinking? I spread my preliminary notes across the table. Day 1 focuses on Indigenous culture and environmental stewardship. I've connected with a Squamish Nation elder who's willing to conduct a traditional welcome ceremony and share stories about sustainable land practices. Then we'll visit a salmon restoration project where participants can learn about conservation efforts while helping release young fish into local streams. That sounds incredible. What about the other days? Day 2 is artisan crafts and local cuisine. I've arranged workshops with a master glassblower, a traditional woodcarver, and a textile artist who uses techniques passed down from her Japanese grandmother. For meals, we'll eat at restaurants that source everything within 50 miles and prepare dishes that reflect the region's multicultural heritage. Madison was taking notes, her business mind already working through logistics. Transportation, accommodations, weather contingencies? All handled. I've chartered small buses to maintain an intimate atmosphere, booked a boutique hotel that's committed to zero-waste practices, and identified backup indoor venues for every outdoor activity. I felt the familiar thrill of a complex project coming together. Day 3 is the crown jewel, a private island experience in the Gulf Islands. Overnight camping under the stars, traditional cooking methods, and a sunrise meditation session, led by a local mindfulness instructor. Jana, this is going to be amazing. The Guild made the perfect choice asking you to coordinate this. She squeezed my hand across the table. I'm so proud of how far you've come. A year ago, people were questioning your business model. Now you're being trusted with the travel industry's most important networking event. Over the next 6 weeks, I threw myself into preparations with obsessive attention to detail. Every vendor was vetted multiple times. Every activity was personally tested. Every meal was sampled and approved. I created detailed backup plans for weather complications, transportation delays, and dietary restrictions. The Guild's event coordinator, Patricia Wellman, praised my thoroughness during our weekly check-in calls. I've worked with dozens of event planners over the years, Patricia told me during our final planning session. Your level of preparation is extraordinary. The Guild board is already talking about expanding this concept to other regions. Madison became my unofficial assistant, helping coordinate communication between vendors and maintaining the intricate spreadsheets that tracked every participant's preferences and requirements. She took vacation time from her accounting job to join me for the final site visits, ensuring every location met the high standards the Guild expected. You should consider making this a regular part of your business, she suggested as we toured the private island where the final day would culminate. Corporate retreat planning, industry conferences, exclusive group experiences. There's huge money in high-end event coordination. The suggestion made sense. Several Guild members had already inquired about booking similar experiences for their own companies or client groups. If the summit succeeded, it could open an entirely new revenue stream that would provide steady income between my individual client trips. 3 days before the event, I moved to Vancouver to oversee final preparations. Everything was proceeding flawlessly. The Squamish elder, Joseph Harrison, had spent hours with me perfecting the welcome ceremony to ensure it would be respectful and meaningful for the diverse group of participants. The artisan workshops were ready, with materials prepared and workspace arranged. The boutique hotel had confirmed special amenities for each guest room, including locally made welcome gifts and personalized schedules printed on handmade paper. Madison arrived the evening before the summit began, ostensibly to provide last-minute support, but clearly excited to witness the culmination of our weeks of collaboration. We had dinner at one of the featured restaurants, testing the menu one final time and briefing the staff about dietary restrictions and timing requirements. "I can't believe you've pulled this together so seamlessly," she said as we walked back to the hotel. "Tomorrow is going to be perfect. I can feel it." Her confidence was reassuring, but I was experiencing the pre-event anxiety that always accompanied high-stakes projects. So many details had to align perfectly. So many people were depending on my ability to deliver an exceptional experience. The guild members were sophisticated travelers who had seen the world's best destinations and most exclusive experiences. Impressing them required something truly special. "Get some sleep," Madison advised as we reached our rooms. "Tomorrow you get to show everyone why you're the best at what you do." The first day began exactly as planned. Joseph Harrison's welcome ceremony moved several participants to tears with its combination of ancient tradition and contemporary environmental message. The Salmon Restoration Project provided hands-on learning that engaged even the most jaded travel writers. Lunch at the farm-to-table restaurant showcased ingredients so fresh and preparations so innovative that food bloggers were already posting photos and rave reviews. "This is exactly what authentic cultural tourism should be," commented Rebecca Chen, senior editor at Condé Nast Traveler. "You've created experiences that feel genuine and educational without being performative or exploitative." Day 2 exceeded expectations as well. The artisan workshops provided intimate access to master craftspeople who rarely open their studios to outsiders. Participants left with handmade pieces they'd created themselves, tangible memories of skills passed down through generations. The multicultural dinner featured dishes that told the story of Vancouver's immigrant communities through flavors and techniques brought from around the world. Patricia Wellman pulled me aside during the evening reception. "Jana, this has been phenomenal. The Guild Board wants to discuss expanding this model to Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. You've created something we can build an entire program around." I went to bed that night feeling triumphant. One more day, and I would have delivered an event that could transform my business and establish me as a leader in experiential travel design. The private island finale would provide the perfect crescendo, combining natural beauty with cultural learning in an unforgettable setting. But when I woke up on the final morning, everything began unraveling with devastating speed. The charter boat company called at 6 a.m. Their captain had become violently ill during the night and was hospitalized with what appeared to be severe food poisoning. The backup captain was unavailable due to a family emergency, and no other company could provide suitable transportation for 50 people on such short notice. "I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez," the marina manager explained over the phone. "We've never had anything like this happen. Both our captains getting sick simultaneously is unprecedented." I immediately began working through alternatives, but every call led to the same response. The few companies with boats large enough for our group were already committed to other charters. Smaller operators could handle maybe 15 people, but splitting the group would destroy the communal experience that was central to the island adventure. By 8 a.m., when participants were gathering for breakfast before departure, I had to make an announcement that felt like professional suicide. "I'm afraid we've encountered an unprecedented situation with our transportation to the island," I began, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. "Both captains from our charter company have been hospitalized with food poisoning, and we haven't been able to secure alternative transportation for the full group." The reaction was immediate and devastating. These were people accustomed to flawless execution who had built their reputations on being able to deliver exclusive experiences to their own clients. A logistical failure of this magnitude reflected directly on their judgment in attending an event I'd organized. "This is exactly why we don't work with boutique planners," muttered David Lancaster, who coordinated travel for several Fortune 500 companies. "Established companies have backup, systems, and redundancy planning." I tried to salvage the situation by offering alternative activities: guided tours of Vancouver's neighborhoods, visits to additional artisan studios, a group cooking class at a renowned culinary school. But the damage was done. The island experience had been the summit's marquee attraction, featured prominently in all promotional materials and personal invitations. "These alternatives are fine," Rebecca Chen said politely, "but they're not what we were promised. Most of us have experienced similar activities elsewhere. The island overnight was supposed to be unique." As participants grudgingly agreed to modified plans, I retreated to a quiet corner to call Madison. She'd returned to Seattle the previous evening, having seen the first 2 days succeed brilliantly. "Madison, everything's falling apart," I whispered, trying to keep my voice from carrying to the disappointed guild members. "Both boat captains are in the hospital, and I can't find replacement transportation. The entire final day is ruined." "That's impossible," she replied, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Food poisoning doesn't strike 2 people simultaneously unless they ate from the same contaminated source. What did they eat?" "I don't know. The marina manager said it happened overnight, both of them ending up in emergency rooms within hours of each other." I was struggling to hold back tears of frustration and humiliation. "Madison, my reputation is destroyed. These people will never trust me with their own events, and word travels fast in this industry." "Don't panic yet. Maybe we can still fix this." Her voice was calm, analytical. "Have you checked with helicopter companies? Private plane services that could land on the island? Alternative islands with road access?" I spent the next 2 hours pursuing every suggestion she made, but nothing worked. The specific island I'd chosen was accessible only by boat. Helicopter services were prohibitively expensive for such a large group, and alternative locations lacked the pristine natural environment that had made this experience special. The modified day proceeded with forced enthusiasm from participants who were clearly disappointed. Several left early, citing work obligations that sounded suspiciously like polite excuses. Others stayed but spent much of their time on phones and laptops, posting subtle criticisms on social media that would reach thousands of potential clients within hours. "Event coordination requires managing the unmanageable," Patricia Wellman said during a private conversation that felt like a performance review. "What happened today wasn't your fault directly, but it highlights the risks of working with smaller vendors who don't have comprehensive backup systems." The words were diplomatic, but their meaning was clear. The guild would not be expanding our partnership to other cities. My dream of building a corporate events division had evaporated along with the boat captain's health. That evening, as I sat alone in my hotel room reviewing the financial damage and professional consequences, Madison called. "I've been thinking about what happened today," she said without preamble. "Something doesn't add up. I did some research, and that charter company has an impeccable safety record. They've been operating for 20 years without a single incident of crew illness affecting scheduled trips. Accidents happen, Madison. Sometimes there's no logical explanation. But this wasn't random, Jana. I called the hospital pretending to be a concerned client. Both captains presented with identical symptoms at almost exactly the same time. That suggests deliberate poisoning rather than accidental food contamination, the suggestion was so outlandish that I almost laughed. Who would poison boat captains to ruin my event? That's paranoid conspiracy thinking. Is it? You told me yourself that you've been having unusual problems with vendor communications and reservation mix-ups. What if those weren't accidents either? What if someone's been systematically trying to damage your business? I sat in silence, processing the possibility that the recent complications hadn't been random growing pains but coordinated sabotage. The pattern Madison described made sense in a horrifying way. The problems had escalated in severity and scope, targeting my most important clients and highest profile opportunities. Even if that's true, Who would do something like that? And why? I asked. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Her voice carried a determination I'd never heard before. This was supposed to be your breakthrough moment, and someone destroyed it deliberately. We're going to figure out who and why. After hanging up, I stared at the Vancouver skyline through my hotel window, trying to process the day's disaster. In 12 hours, I'd gone from expecting professional triumph to facing potential business failure. The Guild Summit had been my chance to prove I could handle large-scale, high-stakes events. Instead, I'd delivered an embarrassing failure that would follow my reputation for years. But Madison's theory about deliberate sabotage offered a strange comfort. If the boat captains had been poisoned, if my vendor problems had been orchestrated, then today's failure wasn't a reflection of my competence or preparation. It was evidence that someone viewed my success as threatening enough to warrant systematic destruction. The question was who had both the motivation and access necessary to execute such a campaign. As I began mentally reviewing everyone who knew details about my business operations, one possibility seemed too terrible to consider seriously. But as I fell asleep that night, I couldn't shake the growing certainty that the person trying to destroy my business was someone I trusted completely, someone who had intimate access to my plans and vendors, someone who had been playing a very different game than the one I thought we were engaged in. The betrayal, when it finally revealed itself, would be more devastating than any professional failure could ever be. The drive back to Seattle felt longer than usual, every mile giving me more time to dread checking my emails and social media notifications. Madison had offered to come to Vancouver to help with damage control, but there was nothing she could do that wouldn't make the situation worse. The guild members needed space to process their disappointment, and my presence would only remind them of the failure. By the time I reached my apartment, the digital fallout had begun in earnest. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Travel bloggers who had attended the summit were posting carefully worded reviews that praised the first 2 days, while expressing disappointment about the incomplete finale. Their language was professional, but the message was clear. I had overpromised and underdelivered at the worst possible moment. Innovative cultural experiences marred by logistical oversight, wrote Rebecca Chen in a post that already had dozens of comments and shares. The first 2 days showcased exceptional local partnerships, but the canceled island experience raises questions about backup planning for high-stakes events. David Lancaster was less diplomatic on LinkedIn. Boutique event planners often promise unique experiences but lack the infrastructure to handle inevitable complications. This summit highlighted why corporate clients need established vendors with proven crisis management protocols. Each post felt like a public dissection of my professional competence. These were influencers with thousands of followers, people whose opinions shaped industry trends and client decisions. Their measured criticism would reach potential customers across North America, creating doubt about my ability to deliver reliable service. I called my answering service to check for client messages, hoping the damage might be contained to the Vancouver incident. Instead, I found a series of increasingly urgent voicemails from existing clients reporting new problems with their upcoming trips. Mrs. Patricia Thornton from Denver was nearly in tears, describing how the luxury spa in Tuscany had called to cancel her couple's massage package, claiming they'd never received confirmation or payment despite my records showing both had been processed weeks earlier. Mr. James Morrison from Chicago was furious that his private wine tasting in Bordeaux had been double booked, forcing him and his wife to share their anniversary celebration with another group. "I trusted you with our 40th wedding anniversary trip." Morrison's voicemail crackled with anger. This was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and now it's been reduced to a generic tour group situation. I expect a full refund and compensation for this embarrassment. 3 more clients had similar stories. Reservations mysteriously canceled, exclusive experiences suddenly unavailable. payments that vendors claimed they'd never received. The pattern was becoming undeniable, but it was also accelerating at exactly the worst time. News of the Vancouver disaster was spreading through industry networks, making every subsequent problem appear to be evidence of systematic incompetence rather than isolated incidents. My business phone rang constantly over the next 48 hours, but not with new bookings. Existing clients were calling to express concerns about their upcoming trips, demanding additional assurances that their experiences wouldn't be affected by whatever was causing my recent problems. Several asked for detailed backup plans and secondary vendor contacts, requirements I'd never faced before but now seemed necessary to maintain any credibility. "Jana, I hate to do this," said Mrs. Eleanor Fredericks, a repeat client who had booked me for 3 previous trips. "But given what I'm hearing about recent complications, I think I need to postpone our Rhine River cruise until you've resolved these operational issues. I can't risk my family reunion being disrupted by vendor mix-ups." The postponement represented a $12,000 booking, money I'd already counted toward the quarter's revenue projections. Worse, Eleanor had been planning to bring her extended family from across the country, a group large enough to generate referrals and testimonials that could sustain my business for months. Madison called twice daily, offering support and pressing me for details about each new crisis. She'd taken to researching every vendor that reported problems, looking for patterns or connections that might explain the systematic failures. "The spa in Tuscany has been in business for 15 years without any payment processing issues," she reported during one of our evening conversations. I spoke with their manager, pretending to be a potential client, and she confirmed they've never had problems with credit card authorizations or wire transfers. Then suddenly, your payment disappears from their system with no record of the transaction. Maybe it's a banking issue. International transfers can be complicated. I thought so too, so I called your bank. They have records of every payment you made, complete with confirmation numbers and recipient details. The money left your account and should have arrived at the vendor's accounts. Somehow, it's vanishing in transit. The financial implications were staggering. I was being forced to pay twice for the same services, once through the original transactions that had mysteriously disappeared, and again to ensure my clients' experiences proceeded as planned. My carefully maintained cash reserves were being depleted by what appeared to be systematic theft, though I couldn't prove who was intercepting the payments or how. Kyle joined Madison for our strategy session that weekend, bringing his Microsoft experience with digital security and fraud prevention. He listened to my recounting of the vendor problems with the analytical approach of someone accustomed to investigating system failures. "This isn't random," he concluded after reviewing my transaction records and vendor communications. "Someone with detailed knowledge of your booking processes and vendor relationships is systematically disrupting your operations. They know exactly which reservations to target for maximum impact and which vendors to approach with false information." "But who has that kind of access to my business details?" I asked, though even as I spoke, I dreaded the answer. Kyle exchanged a meaningful look with Madison before responding carefully. "The list of people with comprehensive knowledge of your operations, vendor contacts, and booking schedules is very short, Jana. You need to consider the possibility that someone close to your business is working against you." The suggestion hung in the air like an accusation neither of them wanted to make directly. I'd been so grateful for Madison's support and involvement in my business that I hadn't considered whether her access to my systems and vendor relationships might be enabling the very problems we were trying to solve. "I trust Madison completely," I said firmly. "She's been helping me build this business, not tear it down." "Of course you do, and you should," Kyle replied gently. "But Madison isn't the only person who's gained access to your operational details. Recently, think about everyone who's been involved in your business planning, who's had access to vendor contracts, who knows your client schedules and payment procedures." Over the following week, the crisis escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The Travel Plus Leisure editor who had featured me in their innovative consultants article called to express concern about my recent difficulties. They'd received complaints from guild members about the Vancouver event and were reconsidering their planned follow-up feature about my group experiences. "We pride ourselves on highlighting professionals with proven track records," the editor explained diplomatically. "Recent developments suggest we may have been premature in our assessment of your business stability." The magazine's withdrawal of support triggered a cascade of canceled opportunities. Speaking engagements at travel conferences were rescinded, with polite explanations about program changes and scheduling conflicts. Partnership discussions with luxury travel brands stalled as companies waited to see if my recent problems were temporary setbacks or signs of deeper operational issues. Most devastating was the call from Patricia Wellman at the Pacific Northwest Travel Guild. The organization had decided to pursue their multi-city expansion plan with a larger, more established event planning company. My failure in Vancouver had convinced them that boutique operators, regardless of their creativity and cultural connections, lacked the infrastructure necessary for high-stakes corporate events. "You created something beautiful for the first 2 days," Patricia said, her voice genuinely regretful. "But our members need absolute reliability. We can't afford another situation where external factors compromise the entire experience." The professional rejection felt like a door slamming shut on everything I'd worked to achieve. The guild expansion could have transformed my boutique consulting practice into a nationally recognized brand. Instead, my reputation in the industry was now associated with ambitious plans undermined by poor execution and inadequate crisis management. But the personal cost was even higher. The constant stress of managing crises and disappointing clients was affecting my health and mental state. I wasn't sleeping properly, surviving on caffeine and adrenaline while trying to salvage each new disaster. My apartment, once a peaceful refuge between travels, now felt like a war room where I spent 18 hours a day on damage control calls. Friends who had followed my success with excitement and admiration began treating me with the careful sympathy reserved for someone experiencing a very public failure. Their encouragement felt hollow because they couldn't understand the complexity of what was happening. To them, I was simply a small business owner who had expanded too quickly and was now paying the price for overambition. "Maybe it's time to scale back and focus on what you do best," suggested my friend Sarah during a coffee meeting that felt more like an intervention. "Individual trip planning, small group experiences, the stuff you built your reputation on. This corporate event thing might be too much, too fast." The advice was well-intentioned, but missed the point entirely. I wasn't failing because I'd overextended myself or taken on challenges beyond my capabilities. I was being systematically sabotaged by someone who understood my business well enough to target its most vulnerable points. Madison remained my strongest supporter through the worst of it, spending hours helping me document vendor communications and payment discrepancies. She'd taken additional time off from her accounting job to assist with crisis management, fielding client calls and researching alternative solutions when vendors canceled at the last minute. "We're going to figure this out," she assured me after a particularly devastating day when 3 separate clients had reported problems with their European bookings. "Someone is doing this deliberately, and when we find out who, we're going to make sure they face consequences for trying to destroy your business." Her determination was comforting, but I was beginning to wonder if my business could survive long enough for us to identify the saboteur. Each week brought new crises that required immediate attention and financial resources. My savings were being depleted faster than revenue was coming in, and potential clients were increasingly wary of booking with someone whose recent track record suggested operational instability. The breaking point came when Margaret and Harold Whitfield, an elderly couple from Portland, called in tears about their golden anniversary trip to France. They'd saved for 2 years to afford my premium Provence experience, a celebration that was supposed to include their children and grandchildren, in a luxury villa rental with private chef services. "The villa owner says he never confirmed our booking," Margaret sobbed over the phone. "He's rented the property to another family for the same week. Our entire family has taken time off work. booked flights, arranged pet care. This was going to be the last big trip Harold and I could take with everyone together. The Whitfield situation crystallized everything that was wrong with my current circumstances. This wasn't just about business reputation or financial losses anymore. Real people with limited time and resources were being hurt by problems I couldn't control or prevent. Families were missing irreplaceable opportunities because someone was using my business as a weapon in a war I didn't even understand. That night, as I sat surrounded by client files and vendor contracts, trying to piece together alternative arrangements for the Whitfields while managing 3 other crisis situations, I finally admitted what I'd been avoiding for weeks. My business, the dream I'd spent 4 years building from nothing, was being systematically destroyed by someone who knew exactly how to cause maximum damage. The only question remaining was whether I could identify my saboteur and stop them before they succeeded in ruining everything I'd worked to create. But with each passing day, as new crises emerged and existing problems multiplied, that possibility seemed increasingly remote. The person targeting my business was smart, careful, and had intimate knowledge of my operations. They were playing a long game, creating a pattern of failures that looked like incompetence rather than sabotage. And they were winning. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Harold Whitfield, the elderly man whose golden anniversary trip had been sabotaged, called me 3 days after I'd managed to secure alternative accommodations for his family in Provence. His voice was hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether to share what he'd discovered. "Ms. Rodriguez, I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but something strange happened that I thought you should know about." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The villa owner in France, Monsieur Dubois, he spoke with my grandson who's studying there. He said a woman called him pretending to be from your company, claiming there had been a payment error and asking him to cancel our reservation." My blood went cold. "What woman?" Did he describe her voice? American accent, very professional. She knew details about our booking that only someone from your office would know. Our anniversary date, the number of guests, even that we'd requested the specific bedroom on the ground floor because of my wife's arthritis. Harold's voice grew more troubled. "Monsieur Dubois said she seemed to know your business very well, mentioned other clients and properties. That's why he believed her when she said the booking needed to be canceled." After hanging up with Harold, I sat staring at my computer screen, pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to align. Someone had been impersonating my business, using detailed client information to convince vendors to cancel reservations. But the level of specific knowledge required meant this wasn't a random scammer or competitor. This was someone with complete access to my booking systems and client files. I spent the next several hours calling other vendors who had reported problems with my reservations. Maria, the potter in Portugal, remembered receiving a call from a woman claiming to be my assistant, saying that the workshop booking needed to be moved to a different date. The hotel manager in Vienna recalled a similar conversation about payment issues that had led to the cancellation of anniversary amenities. "She sounded very official," Maria told me in broken English. "She knew about your visit, how we met, even that you bought the blue ceramic bowl for your apartment. I thought she must work closely with you." The description was consistent across multiple vendors. Professional American woman with detailed knowledge of my business operations and client relationships. Someone who could convincingly impersonate a member of my team because she essentially was a member of my team. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and began examining my business email accounts with fresh eyes. I'd given Madison access to my client management system months earlier, when she'd started helping with the Ireland trip planning. She'd needed to coordinate with vendors, access client preferences, and manage booking confirmations. At the time, it had seemed like a natural extension of our growing partnership. Now I realized that Access had provided her with everything necessary to systematically destroy my business from the inside. I started documenting every suspicious incident, cross-referencing them with times when Madison had been helping with my business operations. The pattern was devastating in its clarity. Every major sabotage incident had occurred within days of Madison reviewing the relevant files or participating in planning conversations. The Vancouver boat charter disaster seemed impossible to explain, until I remembered Madison suggesting the specific company during our initial planning stages. She'd researched several options and recommended them based on their safety record and capacity. She'd also insisted on personally confirming the booking details with the marina manager the week before the event, claiming she wanted to ensure nothing went wrong. I called the marina manager directly, identifying myself and asking about recent communications regarding my charter booking. "Oh, yes, your assistant called several times," he confirmed. "Very thorough lady. She was particularly interested in what the captains typically ate during their shifts. Said she wanted to make sure they were well fed for such an important charter." The implication was chilling. Madison hadn't been confirming booking details. She'd been gathering information necessary to poison both captains with enough precision to incapacitate them without causing permanent harm. The food poisoning that had seemed like a tragic coincidence was actually a calculated attack designed to destroy my most important professional opportunity. But understanding her methods was only part of the puzzle. I still couldn't comprehend her motivations. Madison had seemed genuinely supportive of my business success. She'd celebrated my achievements, referred clients to me, and spent countless hours helping with operations. Why would she simultaneously be working to destroy everything we'd built together? The answer came when I began examining the timeline more carefully. The sabotage incidents had started shortly after my Travel Plus Leisure article was published, when my business began receiving national recognition. They'd escalated when I started talking about expanding into corporate event planning, and had reached crisis levels around the time of the Vancouver Guild Summit. Madison wasn't trying to destroy my business randomly. She was trying to prevent it from growing beyond the level where she could remain involved and relevant. I called Kyle, Madison's husband, hoping he might provide insight into her behavior without realizing what I was investigating. "Has Madison seemed stressed lately? Different somehow?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Kyle's response was telling. "She's been obsessed with your business, actually. Spends hours every night reading travel industry blogs, researching competitors, tracking your social media metrics. She knows more about your booking numbers than I know about my own work projects. That seems intense." "It is. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets not taking risks like you did. She talks constantly about how successful you've become, but there's this edge to it, like she's keeping score of something." Kyle paused, then added more quietly, "To be honest, I've been worried about how invested she's gotten in your affairs. It's not healthy for her to be so focused on someone else's career." The conversation confirmed what I was beginning to understand. Madison's support for my business had never been about helping me succeed. It had been about maintaining control over my success, ensuring that I remained dependent on her involvement and never grew beyond her ability to influence or sabotage. Armed with this understanding, I began setting a trap. I created a fake client, booking for a high-profile corporate retreat in Napa Valley, complete with detailed requirements and a substantial budget. I mentioned the opportunity to Madison during one of our regular check-ins, emphasizing how important the client was and how much the booking would mean for my business expansion goals. "This could be the corporate contract that changes everything," I told her, watching her reaction carefully. "They want a full luxury experience, private vineyard tours, Michelin-starred dining, exclusive accommodations. If I can deliver this perfectly, they're talking about hiring me for events in other markets." Madison's smile looked genuine, but I caught something else in her expression. A calculation, a measuring of threat levels. "That's amazing, Jana. You'll want to be extra careful with all the details. Corporate clients can be unforgiving if anything goes wrong." I shared the fake booking details with her over the next few days, providing vendor contact information and client preferences. Then I waited to see what would happen. The calls started within 48 hours. The fictional vineyard I'd selected began, receiving inquiries from a woman claiming to be from my company, asking detailed questions about booking policies and payment procedures. The luxury hotel reported similar contacts, with someone seeking information about cancellation terms and vendor relationships. But the definitive proof came when I called the restaurant I'd listed as the client's preferred dining venue. The manager recognized my voice immediately. "Ms. Rodriguez, your assistant called yesterday with some concerns about the private dining reservation. She seemed worried that our kitchen might not be able to accommodate all the dietary restrictions for your corporate group." I'd never spoken to this restaurant before, and there was no actual corporate group. The only way someone could have contacted them was by using the fake information I'd shared exclusively with Madison. Confronting her directly felt impossible. Madison was my sister, someone I'd trusted completely and who had been instrumental in rebuilding our relationship over the past year. But the evidence was overwhelming, and more importantly, she was continuing to actively sabotage my business, even as I was sharing my discoveries with her. I decided to gather irrefutable proof before making any accusations. Working with Kyle's guidance, I installed monitoring software on my business email accounts and client management system. The program would track every access attempt, recording IP addresses, timestamps, and actions taken. I also set up a separate secure email account and began conducting real business through channels Madison couldn't access. The monitoring data painted a damning picture. Madison's home IP address appeared in my system logs at all hours, often in the middle of the night when she claimed to be sleeping. She was regularly accessing client files for bookings she had no reason to review, downloading vendor contact lists, and examining financial records that weren't relevant to any projects she was helping with. Most revealing were the timestamps. She'd accessed the Vancouver Charter Company's contact information the night before both captains fell ill. She'd reviewed the Whitfield family's villa booking details hours before the cancellation call to France. Every piece of evidence pointed to a systematic campaign of intelligence gathering, followed by targeted sabotage. But I needed her to reveal herself directly, to provide proof that couldn't be disputed or explained away. I created one final test, a fake emergency booking for a celebrity client who supposedly needed last-minute travel arrangements for a confidential personal matter. I told Madison the story in dramatic detail, emphasizing how much money was involved and how career-defining this opportunity could be. "I can't believe this is happening," I confided to her over coffee. "This client specifically chose me because of my reputation for discretion and flawless execution. If I can pull this off, every A-list publicist in Hollywood will have my number." Madison listened with apparent excitement, asking all the right questions and offering to help coordinate details. I provided her with contact information for the high-end resort, where the fictional celebrity supposedly wanted to stay, along with specific requirements that would make the booking unmistakable. 24 hours later, I called the resort pretending to be a potential guest inquiring about availability. "We've been expecting your call," the reservations manager said immediately. "Your colleague already contacted us about the celebrity booking situation. She seemed very concerned about ensuring everything would be handled properly." "My colleague?" "Yes. She called yesterday asking detailed questions about our privacy policies and security measures. She wanted to make sure we could guarantee that no information about the guest would be shared with media or other guests." The manager's voice took on a conspiratorial tone. She seemed particularly interested in our procedure for handling last-minute cancellations, though I assured her that wouldn't be necessary for such an important client. The trap had worked perfectly. Madison was already positioning herself to sabotage a booking that existed only in the fictional scenario I'd shared with her. But proof of her actions wasn't enough. I needed to understand why she was doing this. What had driven my sister to systematically destroy something she claimed to support? The opportunity for answers came when she called that evening, excited to discuss strategy for the celebrity booking. Jana, I've been thinking about this opportunity all day, she began, her voice animated with false enthusiasm. This could really put you on the map, but you need to be incredibly careful. One mistake with a client like this could ruin your reputation permanently. I know. That's why I'm so grateful to have your help. Of course. We're family. I'll always be here to support you. Her words carried an undertone that hadn't been there before, something possessive and controlling. You know, it's funny how much your business has grown since I started helping you. Before that, you were just doing small individual trips. Now look what we've built together. The pronoun choice was telling. In Madison's mind, my business success was something we had created, not something I had built independently. Her support hadn't been selfless assistance. It had been an investment in maintaining control over my achievements. Madison, I said carefully, what would happen if I didn't need your help anymore? If the business grew large enough that I had to hire professional staff? The question hung in the air for a moment too long. Well, that would be wonderful for you, she finally replied, but her tone had shifted. Though I hope you wouldn't forget the people who helped you get there. Family should always come first, shouldn't it? The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable. Madison's definition of family loyalty required keeping her centrally involved in my success, regardless of whether that involvement was beneficial or necessary. My independence wasn't something to be celebrated. It was a betrayal to be prevented. Of course family comes first, I agreed, while simultaneously recording the conversation and documenting another piece of evidence for the confrontation that was now inevitable. Madison's motivation was finally clear. She hadn't been sabotaging my business out of simple jealousy or resentment. She'd been maintaining control over my success by ensuring it never grew beyond her ability to influence or destroy. Every act of sabotage had been calibrated to damage my reputation, just enough to keep me dependent on her support, while never completely destroying the business that gave her purpose and importance. It was a calculated form of psychological and financial abuse, disguised as sisterly concern and family loyalty, and it had nearly worked. The next morning, I began preparing for the most difficult conversation of my life. I had the evidence, I understood the motivations, and I knew that Madison would continue destroying my business until I found the courage. To stop her, the confrontation would shatter our rebuilt relationship and potentially tear apart our entire family. But the alternative was allowing her to continue controlling and sabotaging my life indefinitely. The truth was finally clear, but revealing it would require destroying the very family bonds Madison had manipulated to justify her actions. The confrontation took place on a Tuesday morning at Madison's house, while Kyle was at work and the kids were at school. I'd chosen the timing deliberately, wanting privacy for a conversation that would inevitably become emotional and potentially explosive. Madison greeted me at the door with her usual warm smile, completely unaware that I'd spent the previous week documenting her systematic betrayal. "Come in, come in!" "I made coffee," she said, leading me toward the kitchen where she'd laid out pastries and set the table as if this were just another sister chat about business strategy. "I've been researching venues for your celebrity client. I found some incredible options that offer absolute privacy." I sat across from her at the same table where we'd shared countless meals growing up, where she'd helped me with homework and listened to my teenage heartbreaks. The familiarity of the setting made what I was about to do feel even more surreal. "Madison, we need to talk about something serious," I began, pulling out a folder containing printed screenshots, call logs, and system access reports. "I know what you've been doing to my business." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "The boat captains in Vancouver. The canceled reservations in Europe. The mysterious payment problems that only affect my most important clients." I spread the evidence across her kitchen table like playing cards. "I know it's been you all along." Madison's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, surprise, hurt, and finally something that looked almost like relief. She set down her coffee and stared at the documents without touching them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly, but her voice lacked conviction. Harold Whitfield's villa owner described the woman who called to cancel their reservation. Professional American accent, detailed knowledge of booking specifics, familiar with my business operations. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "The resort manager for the fake celebrity booking remembers your call asking about cancellation policies. Your IP address appears in my business system logs dozens of times when you had no reason to access those files." Madison sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap like a child caught in an elaborate lie. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from remorse or frustration at being discovered. "Why?" I asked, and the single word carried years of confusion and betrayal. "Why would you destroy something you claimed to support? Why would you hurt people like the Whitfields, who trusted me with their special moments?" "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," she whispered. I couldn't let you outgrow me." The admission hung between us like a confession of something darker than I'd imagined. This wasn't about business competition or sibling rivalry. This was about control, about Madison's inability to accept that I had built something successful without needing her constant management. "When your article came out in Travel Plus Leisure, everyone was so proud of you," she continued, her voice growing stronger as if the secret's revelation had freed her to explain herself. "Mom called everyone in the family to brag about your success. Dad kept showing the magazine to his friends at the hardware store. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the responsible daughter they were proud of. I was just ordinary." I stared at her, struggling to process how my achievements had been transformed in her mind into attacks on her identity. "So you decided to sabotage me? To hurt innocent people who were paying me to create special memories?" "I never wanted to destroy your business completely," Madison said, tears flowing freely now. "I just wanted to keep you from getting so big that you wouldn't need me anymore. When you started talking about corporate events and national expansion, I panicked. I thought if I could create some problems, some setbacks, you'd stay focused on the smaller personal trips where we could work together. Madison, those setbacks nearly ruined my reputation. The Guild Summit failure could have ended my career entirely." "I know," she sobbed. "I know it went too far. The boat captain thing, I never intended for both of them to get so sick. I thought, maybe one would have stomach issues and you'd have to adjust the schedule, not cancel the entire experience. And when I saw how devastated you were afterward, I realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize." The explanation felt simultaneously like vindication and devastating loss. I'd been right about the systematic sabotage, but learning that my own sister had been the architect of my professional near-destruction was more painful than I'd anticipated. "Did Kyle know?" I asked. Madison shook her head emphatically. "Never. He would have stopped me immediately. He kept telling me I was too invested in your business, that it wasn't healthy for me to be so focused on your success. He had no idea. How right he was." I gathered the evidence papers back into their folder, needing something to do with my hands while I processed the magnitude of her betrayal. Madison had risked my financial stability, my professional reputation, and my clients' trust to satisfy her own psychological need to remain relevant in my success story. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Now you're going to help me fix everything you broke," I said firmly. "You're going to call every vendor who received false information and explain that there was a miscommunication from someone who no longer represents my business. You're going to provide written statements about the actual events for any client who experienced problems, and you're going to compensate my business for the revenue lost due to your sabotage." Madison nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Of course. Whatever it takes to make this right. More importantly, you're going to get professional help. This level of controlling behavior isn't normal sibling rivalry, Madison. You need to understand why you felt entitled to manipulate and destroy something that wasn't yours to control. The suggestion seemed to surprise her, as if she'd never considered that her actions reflected deeper psychological issues. "I'll do whatever you think is necessary," she agreed. "I just want you to know that I do love you, Jana. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even if I had a terrible way of showing it." "I believe that you love me," I replied carefully, "but love doesn't excuse what you did. Real support means celebrating someone's success without trying to control or limit it." Over the following days, Madison kept her promise to help repair the damage she'd caused. She spent hours on international phone calls, explaining to confused vendors why they'd received contradictory information about bookings and payments. Her accounting background proved useful in documenting the financial impact of her sabotage, creating a clear record of losses that her personal savings would need to cover. The hardest part was telling our parents. Dad's reaction was immediate and explosive anger, directed entirely at Madison. He'd spent 40 years building his construction business on reputation and reliability, and the idea that one of his daughters had deliberately undermined those principles in another's business appalled him beyond measure. "How could you do something so destructive to your own sister?" he demanded during the family meeting where Madison confessed her actions. "Jana trusted you with her business. She brought you into something she'd worked years to build, and you used that trust as a weapon against her." Mom's response was more complex, mixing disappointment with a desperate desire to understand her daughter's motivations. She kept asking questions that suggested she hoped to find some justification, some explanation that would make Madison's actions seem less deliberately cruel. "But you were helping her," Mom said repeatedly. "You were so supportive of her business. Why would you help her and hurt her at the same time?" "Because the help was never about Jana's success," Madison explained, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "It was about making myself indispensable to her success. I wanted to be the reason her business worked, not just a sister who cheered from the sidelines." The family dynamics shifted permanently after that revelation. Dad maintained a civil but distant relationship with Madison, making it clear that rebuilding his trust would require years of demonstrated change. Mom struggled with feeling partially responsible, wondering if her praise for my achievements had somehow contributed to Madison's competitive desperation. Kyle's reaction surprised everyone with its pragmatic focus on moving forward constructively. He insisted that Madison begin therapy immediately and suggested she take a leave of absence from her accounting job to address the underlying issues that had led to such destructive behavior. "This isn't just about Jana's business," he told her during a conversation I was privileged to witness. "If you can sabotage your sister's career to satisfy some psychological need for control, what does that mean for our marriage? For how you might handle Emma and Noah's future successes?" The question forced Madison to confront the broader implications of her actions, to recognize that her controlling behavior wasn't limited to professional jealousy, but reflected deeper issues with allowing others to succeed independently. For my part, I implemented strict boundaries around my business operations. Madison's access to my systems was permanently revoked, and I hired a professional assistant to handle vendor communications and client coordination. The additional expense was significant, but the peace of mind was invaluable. More importantly, I restructured my business relationships to ensure no single person could ever again have enough access to cause systematic damage. Client information was compartmentalized, vendor relationships were diversified, and payment systems were designed with multiple verification steps to prevent unauthorized cancellations. The rebuilding process took months, but the results exceeded my expectations. Clients who had experienced problems during Madison's sabotage campaign were impressed by my thorough investigation and professional response to the crisis. Several became even more loyal customers, appreciating the transparency and accountability I demonstrated in addressing the issues. The Vancouver Guild disaster, once properly explained with evidence of deliberate sabotage, actually enhanced my reputation in the industry. Patricia Wellman was horrified to learn that a family member had orchestrated the boat charter failure, and the Guild issued a formal statement supporting my professionalism and expressing regret for the circumstances, beyond my control. "This makes your handling of the crisis even more impressive," Patricia told me during a follow-up conversation. "You managed an impossible situation with grace and still created alternative experiences that our members enjoyed. We're definitely interested in working with you again once you've had time to fully recover from this ordeal." The Travel Plus Leisure editor was equally supportive, and the magazine published a follow-up article about resilience in small business operations, featuring my experience as an example of how professional entrepreneurs handle deliberate sabotage and crisis management. Within 6 months, my business was not only fully recovered but stronger than before. The publicity around the sabotage investigation had attracted attention from potential clients who were impressed by my thoroughness and commitment to quality service. Bookings increased significantly, and I was able to hire 2 full-time employees to handle the growing demand. Madison completed 6 months of intensive therapy and began making genuine efforts to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. She started her own small accounting practice, focusing on helping other small business owners with financial planning and tax preparation. Her first-hand experience with business operations, gained through her involvement with my travel consulting, proved valuable in serving clients with similar challenges. "I'm trying to channel what I learned about your business into something constructive," she told me during one of our carefully structured monthly coffee meetings. Helping other entrepreneurs succeed without needing to control or limit their success. The relationship between us would never return to the easy intimacy we'd shared before her betrayal, but it evolved into something more honest and sustainable. Madison had to earn back trust through consistent actions over time, while I learned to maintain appropriate boundaries even with family members who claimed to be supportive. The experience taught me lessons that extended far beyond business operations. Success attracts both genuine supporters and people who want to control or diminish that success for their own psychological purposes. Learning to distinguish between the two and to protect your achievements from both obvious enemies and manipulative allies is essential for long-term prosperity. Most importantly, I discovered that surviving deliberate sabotage and emerging stronger demonstrated a level of resilience and professional competence that impressed clients and industry colleagues more than smooth operations ever could. The crisis had tested every aspect of my business model and proven that my foundation was solid enough to withstand even systematic attack from someone with intimate knowledge of my operations. Today, my travel consulting business serves clients across 3 continents, and I'm recognized as a leader in authentic cultural tourism. The corporate events division that Madison had tried to prevent through sabotage now represents 40% of my annual revenue. I've authored a guidebook about sustainable travel practices and speak regularly at industry conferences about crisis management and family business dynamics. Madison and I maintain a relationship, but it's built on clearly defined boundaries and mutual respect rather than the codependent dynamic she had tried to create. She's learned to celebrate my successes without needing to be central to them, and I've learned to accept family support without surrendering control over my business decisions. The most valuable lesson from the entire experience was understanding that sometimes the people who claim to support your dreams are actually trying to limit them to a size they can manage or control. Real support means encouraging someone to grow beyond what you can provide, even if that means becoming less relevant to their success story. Building something meaningful always involves risks, and sometimes those risks come from unexpected directions. But surviving betrayal from someone you trusted completely teaches you that your strength and competence are sufficient to overcome any challenge, as long as you maintain the courage to face difficult truths and make necessary changes. Success isn't just about achieving your goals. It's about protecting those achievements from people who would diminish them, while remaining open to genuine support from those who want to see you thrive independently. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.